All right, please welcome up the director, Stefano Sollima, and producer, Edward McDonnell. All right. Thank you both so much for coming.
It's a real pleasure to be here.
He spoke like that every day.
Among all the future of our industry. So it's great to be here.
So I think that the starting point is really for Edward, because it's not, this kind of a story doesn't necessarily immediately lend itself to a sequel. You have to come up with a story that really moves, that world forward. And I'm curious to know a little bit about developing a second story with these characters, how you wanted to proceed, and then, of course, how you found Stefano.
Sure. About halfway through shooting the first one, Benicio and Josh both said, this has a future. And so we started to think about it and sort of reached out to Taylor, who in his head, he already had a future for it. So it started there, and it was the only change really from our initial conversation was that Emily always said, the only way I'm coming back is if you ask me to kill these two fuckers. So that's why Emily's not. You saw the first one, morally, her character would never have come back unless it was get rid of these two guys. But we started with that, and Taylor went off. I think even before we finished shooting the first one, he sort of had the outline of the story in his head, sold it to us, and basically, as soon as the first one came out, he was engaged to write it. And Taylor's incredibly quick writer, so within, I think, 2 or 3 months, we had a first draft. And based on the first draft, we started to look for a director. And we met a lot of people. And then we came across Stefano, who walked into the room and said, this is how I see your movie. I don't have his accent, but it was very Italian, it was very passionate, it was very clear. He understood the first movie, but he also understood that he wanted to make his own movie. And that's what we wanted. We didn't want somebody who was going to make a repeat of the movie. We didn't want somebody who was just going to copy what Denny had done. And Stefano's work so clearly showed us that he had his own voice and his own vision for the material.
Thank you.
I'm all right.
Yeah, when I first read the script, I felt it was really amazing. And for me, that of course I'm an European director, the simple idea to come here and start working here was tricky, for definition. Because of course it's too easy to lose in the transition your own specificity, your own style, your own touch. And then by reading the script, I felt that was really, really close to me. And this is the reason why I put everything on this project by loving it.
Well, sorry, were you going to?
No, it's funny because to get a movie made, the director has to come into a room first with a small group of us and sell us on his idea. And then ultimately he has to come into a room with a lot of executives and a lot of suits. And so when Stefano came into the room, it was one of those scenarios where you go, is this going to go well? And like 20 minutes in, there wasn't a sound in the room, and he had all 10 executives just staring at him, waiting to hear how the story was going to end. So
that's because they didn't understand my English. They were like,
Are there some of those specific parts to the sort of the pitch that you guys can share? I'm curious to know what was it that stood out.
no, I remember just that I asked them to replace almost everybody in the crew to be sure that was a fresh, new movie. And for not having someone on the set that says, "Oh, we did this the last time." So the idea was to start again with a new energy by creating and this was a part. And then we talked about the script and because of course the first script of Taylor was much longer than the movie you're actually watching. So we worked a lot with Taylor. So it was more a pitch on the direction to give to the story.
Sure.
And one I remember was the idea to put them one against the other.
Yeah.
It was part of
Because
my pitch in the beginning.
Well, tell us a little bit about some of the major changes then. Having them go up against each other, but sort of condensing the story down so that it, because there are good chunks of this film that are very much about the character interaction, and then of course you have these bursts of violence and activity. And I'm curious to know what layers you took away from the much longer version.
We took away a little bit the story of the kid, Alaya, and then a massive part that was related to the terrorist bombing. So, and
So minimal
basically the last
the drug card.
page of the end.
Yeah, because we took away the drug card.
We took
Isabel's father, I think at one point had been really a large portion of the original script. It was trying to get to Carlos Reyes. And as we got into developing the story and the characters, we realized the real key was the two of them. It was Josh and Benicio, and how to facilitate a change in the dynamic in the young child was the way in which to do that.
Well, you obviously have a lot of actors coming back from the original, but you have this great young actress coming on board. How did you find her, and what were you looking for?
first a really young girl because was important to have an innocent in a way character. And then we did audition all over US and Mexico. And finally, I find there that she was amazing. And then I asked Benicio to join me during the callback with the girl, and then we were like amazed by her talent.
Yeah, originally we wanted to find somebody from McAllen because the story takes place in McAllen, Texas, and Stefano was really dead set on getting authenticity. So everywhere we went, it's, well, do you speak the appropriate version of Spanish that comes from that area? And ultimately, we found it in the young boy, but we did not find it in the young girl. So Isabel is actually, I think, half Peruvian and half American. So her Spanish was altered a little, and she studied up to speak with a dialect that was closest to where we were supposed to be shooting.
Obviously, this is a much different kind of crime story from the stories that you've been telling in Italy. But give us a little bit of a sense of what you're able to draw from the violence and action based stories that are similar in this kind of a conflict, and what was a new challenge for you when shooting this?
Yeah, I think that every time you approach a project, it's like a new world. So I did it with Gomorrah. Was absolutely the same. Was the same that and of what I did here, but for doing Soldado, you go and you try to understand as much as you can the world that you're supposed to portray. So basically, it's a sort of research that you do on field. But I always did it in my life, so I didn't find it was a different approach. I did almost the same I usually do.
And what kind of research were you able to do for this?
We were at the border, so we spoke with people that actually is involved in the traffic, and then we get as much information as was possible to get.
We spent a lot of time on dusty roads along the border, both Arizona and Texas. And we met a lot of great people. I mean, people who had either been involved or their relatives had been involved in, the transport of humans across the border. And it's a way of life for a lot of them. It's the only way for a lot of them to survive. And so there was an understanding and an empathy you get with them from both sides. It's like, what do we do here? And so I think, for us it was, and I'd done the first one where we were basically researching around Juarez, but to go all the way across the Arizona border and realize that this is a problem and this is a scenario that truly exists.
And what about on the other side of the border? What were you able to do much research there? before you went in? I mean, how tell us
We crawled.
about that experience.
You mean in Mexico? Yeah, but I was let's say I was already prepared because I was doing research for another project that I'm doing now on the cartels. So, but this is different because normally cartels deals with drugs, and what I felt that was special in this project was that the topic was the immigration, illegal immigration. That is, I mean, I think it's a really actual topic.
I think there's a line in the movie that is a direct quote from a Border Patrol agent in terms of, you know what, if they don't make it across, they go back and they're sent back and they pay again the next day and it costs us nothing. I mean, we went across a couple of the smaller towns along the border outside of El Paso in southern Arizona, and it's amazing. It's a real deal. It's still there.
You know, I was thinking this is the second film that has a non-American director. I'm curious if that was that was just because you were looking for talent and you found it in these two filmmakers, or if there was also a perspective of looking at the U.S. and sort of from a different point of view.
Well, the Italians have a reputation for understanding the American Western.
That's absolutely true.
And Stefano's father comes from that world. So there was a history there. And Denny, I think foreigners do have a overview and an objectivity that maybe we don't have, that most Americans are so in the midst of it. And I think Denny's films reflect that. I think Stefano's reflect that. Both Sabura and Gomorrah, you know, he had an insight into a culture that, from an outsider's point of view, he was able to relate and communicate to a neophyte like us. And I understand what was going on in Gomorrah. I understand what was going on in Sabura for the same reasons that I think he had an understanding of what we were talking about here.
Tell us a little bit about the choreography of an action sequence in this movie. How do you prepare for it? What sorts of things are you experimenting with the cinematography, lighting, staging? You know, give us break down a scene for us.
Yeah, let's say this. I don't like action sequence for action sequence. So I mean, it's not the kind of movie that I like to watch, and I don't want to do it. But I feel it's really important in an action. I mean, you have to approach an action sequence as a normal scene. You must put in the center a character. This must be meaningful for one of the character. And for example, in the convoy sequence, that was crazy to read because it was exhausting long, with an incredible amount of characters, with a lot of moving parts. And then the idea was to use just one point of view, Isabel's point of view. And I think that this makes the scene much more interesting, but of course was a little bit tricky to shoot because, of course, by using her point of view, we were forced to shoot almost all the sequence from inside the MV. And then, of course, in let's say the basic in an action sequence is to be covered with different cut as much as you can, because then you can survive to the editing. Well, that way, of course, limited a little bit us and was a little bit more difficult to achieve, but I feel it's really interesting. So we built, along with Darius Wolski, a strange kind of, I don't know how to call it, because it was really an invention we did on set to be able to turn 280 degrees all around by being inside the MB. And then, of course, this was a bit complicated because we had a real actor playing while outside the windows of the MB there was a war with a really big explosion, because I always try to go for practical effects, trying to use as less as possible the VFX.
Was there something in specific that you really fought for in terms of practical effects versus special effects?
More than I wanted to pay for.
But I mean, normally, the point is that I think that the limit of the practical effect is the effect itself. If you cannot get a shot with the practical effect, then you can go for the visual effects. But if you, I mean, it's
No, you're right. You're right. You're right.
yeah. I mean, it's better if you put your actor, real actor, not stunts, in an environment where everything is exploding around them. Trust me, they're going to change. And this is well, how we did almost everything there.
But you are using a very young actress in the film. So are there moments where the sort of the safety concerns with a minor became an issue?
Yes, because normally, you let's say that you cannot have a practical explosion, a squib. I don't know how close to a minor. So we haven't done.
I think that's the great thing about movies is that we struggle to create the sense of reality within the confines of playing safe. But I mean, those were real explosions. To get that truck to tip over, that's a real explosion. To get the gunfire going, those guns aren't shooting real bullets, but they're actually shooting. There's muzzle flash. There are clips coming out. There are shells coming out. So within the confines of being extremely safe, you create the movie magic.
Let's talk a little bit about the ending. Uh, Obviously, it's very chilling, but you know, it's sort of similarly to the last film. There is this sort of sense that this is going to you know, this story goes on, whether or not you know, it's a resolution that makes us feel warm and good about ourselves, which clearly it does not. Um, tell us a little bit about coming up with this final scene. If there were any moments, you know, where there were other things you considered, or if this was always sort of the last, you know, moment you wanted us to take away.
Let's say this. Being honest, we cut in the editing room at the end something like 15 pages. And this was, and I did in my director's cut. And they didn't replace me with another one.
No, and we liked it obviously. So pretty much what you see is
Was it?
yeah.
We because at the end, as it was written, was more the conclusion of, but not really a conclusion. Was more a conclusion between Matt and Cinzia in the compound. So in the script was Matt taking the girl, bring the girl again in the base, and having this final confrontation with his boss, with the chief of the operation. And but we felt it was, I mean, a bit unuseful, and so we cut it, and we went for this. That I think it's more mysterious.
No, and I think even earlier we had a happier ending too, didn't we? Where she was going to go off and go to college.
Yes, exactly.
Really, in one of the versions of the screenplay, she comes back as her dream that she mentions early on in the story is that she wanted to go to college in the U.S. And so we put her in witness protection, and she was going to go off to college, and it never rang true.
Which is actually something, if I remember from Suburra, there was one of the main characters, just, you know, sort of you see her getting hauled off 20 minutes before the end of the film, and then you never see her again. I'm like, oh, I'm really meant to sort of imagine what happens to that character, and that is a fascinating. So tell us a little bit about working with your editor. How what's your process like, and what sort of things did your editor help you discover in the way you were telling the story?
Yeah, normally I ask the editor to edit the whole movie if it's possible. So basically, I go there and then I watch, of course, an exhausting movie because it's a movie with everything. in, because the editor, I mean, try to keep everything. So you're in the second moment you can decide what to keep or what to leave, and because this helps me in having an overall point of view. Because sometimes when you shoot a movie, you are so stuck in your vision that you can miss something. So that way, you can be more objective, and you can watch the movie like you are in a movie theater by having the privilege to change it. And so from there on, I start editing again the movie until the very end. I try to go pretty quick until the end, and then I rewatch it and I start again. I never be too stuck in a sequence for too long, because I try always to have an higher point of view and not to keep the control of all the narrative and all the story.
You were very quick. I think, didn't you show us cut it in like 8 weeks?
Yeah.
So it was a quick process, because usually you get your 10-week director's cut and then we give notes and it's another couple of weeks. But I think at 8 weeks you showed us a cut and we saw another cut at 10 weeks and pretty much stayed right where that was at that point.
But you mentioned earlier that you wanted a fresh start with the crew, but what you do bring over from the previous films is that you've got these lead actors, and I'm sure that Josh and Benicio have their own opinions about who these characters are. So tell us a little bit about working with them and what they sort of bring to having established their characters already to this new story. Besides, obviously, working on.
Yeah, of course they had ideas. They already played the same characters, but the point was that in Soldado, you go absolutely much deeper in exploring their character, each of the two, and then most of all, you don't have the Emily Plant character. That was a sort of audience surrogate, sort of moral guidance during the story. So in this movie, you discover them, and then you're going to be a bit surprised, and you discover different layer of their characters. So let's say that they started by knowing their characters, but the brilliant script put them in front of a lot of forks, where was a big discussion to understand how the guy is gonna react when he's gonna face the girl whose father has killed all his family. What's happened to him? At the end, she's a little girl. What he's gonna do? So I think that I think was an interesting process to work with them, because I think this is a strange kind of a sequel. It's more a standalone, where you have two characters that were portrayed uh, with a filter in the first movie. So I think it was pretty challenging for them too.
Well, also, I think I was thinking that the fact that so much of the first film is told through her point of view, um, now there was a certain amount of I want to say ambiguity over what the U.S. was accomplishing in the first film. That in this film it's far more of an indictment, obviously, of the way that the U.S. government interferes with foreign nations, and part of that is because we do get to step back and see a sort of more of an overview of who these people are and their role within our government. I mean, really, actually having DoD in this film is giving us access to sort of a lot more of an overview than what we saw, which was just through her eyes, basically, in the first film. So, Edward, tell us a little bit about, when you guys were developing the second film, wanting to take that sort of larger view of what this was all about.
Well, I think Matthew Modine's character starts it, and I mean that's really what Taylor sort of focused in on, the idea that the U.S. government has now declared cartels as terrorist organizations. So I mean that was sort of the premise we jumped off from, and the idea that as good as someone's intentions may be, the bureaucracy of governments and militaries tend to not see the microcosm of the individual. And so we jumped off from the idea of, okay, the government set this rule, they've set us up for this idea, but now what's the individual going to do with it? And the development of both Josh's character and Benicio's character, they start off with one point of view, yeah, we're going to be able to do this, but the personal interactions they have along the way impact them in a way that changes the course of the story.
All right, let's open this up to you guys. Who wants to join the conversation? Yes.
Wonderful film. Thank you so much for being here. So one of the most kind of visceral and compelling sequences within the film for me was just before the end, where we had what felt like 15 minutes, but in reality it was probably like 7-10 minutes, where we had no dialogue whatsoever. It was kind of like Revenant-esque, like this vastness of the desert, kind of like we just kind of stew with the protagonist. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the decision to kind of conclude the film on a note that does not have dialogue, because like even in Helicopter, you didn't get to hear anything, and then the experience of directing in the absence of dialogue and still kind of conjuring that emotion.
I would love to make a silent movie. I think this is for a director is the ultimate goal, because he basically you need the dialogue, but I mean, it's a part of the story. It cannot be just a story told by the dialogue. So I would love to make a movie without any line. And then sometimes I try. And this was one of the attempts.
I think you did make a brilliant silent film. This is the one. So much of the story is told through the eyes and through the space between people, and even in the same truck. Then you got us to think about what they were thinking about very beautifully. And I was most impressed with the way the girl went from being suspicious to being trusting. And it wasn't done through story, it was done through looks and action afterwards with beautiful storytelling.
And through an amazing scene that is the sign language.
Yeah.
Where you turn and then again it's a silent scene.
Yeah. My question is, and you said first for a European filmmaker to make an American film, it made me think about the ending, because I think as an American audience member, I like these characters and I'm so curious about what happens next, that you frustrate me as an American audience, like, yeah, but what's going to happen? But I've seen it in European films maybe more than American, that we leave the theater and we're wondering, and we fill in. I don't know if that's a European tendency, but I'm frustrated, but I love it. Because now I can think about it tomorrow. You know?
And that's it, because you finish the movie, I mean, without giving a real conclusion that is not emotional. So it's up to you to close the movie. I mean, it makes no sense if I explain you that the girl is going to be saved with a scene. It's clear. It's the reason why Josh take the girl and put it on the helicopter. And then, of course, he's going to have a trouble for it. So, I mean, it's why to show it?
Because we anticipated.
No, I think you are good. You have to finish a movie in an emotional way, not by explaining something.
It's more challenging, but it's...
No, it's challenging, especially if they let you do it without saying, okay, thank you, Stefano. It was amazing to work with you.
I really love the film. Thank you so much for sharing it. It's interesting you mentioned that you're looking for authenticity in the casting, and it felt like one of the most authentic things I've ever seen. Like everything felt very authentic in a way that was really cool. So thank you guys for being here and talking about it. I wanted to ask you about words. As a European filmmaker directing American films, you do it wonderfully, and I wonder, do you find it difficult or challenging or exciting to be directing dialogue in your second language, or is there any like tension around that, or no?
No, it was a nightmare in the beginning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, of course.
What does this mean?
You lose. Yeah. Because of course you I mean, normally as a director you have to control everything. And then the language is the first thing. And it was tricky, even with the actor, because you have an idea, but then you express the idea really in a super sloppy way. So it was challenging, but at the same time, it was a good exercise for my English. Yeah, it was. Of course, you don't control, especially because I'm obsessed also with the accent. And then, of course, you don't get the accent. So you must trust your actor and all the people you have around you. But I think, of course, you lose a little bit the control. A little bit. Just a bit.
But it's interesting because we start a lot of times with dialogue that after rehearsing a scene, you'll realize that Benicio or even Isabel would say, you know, we don't really need it because we've been able to communicate by a look or a series of events or just the way we move, so that there would be less and less dialogue in some of the scenes, particularly with Benicio, who would say, no, I don't need to say this. I can
Cut it and
communicate it with
credit
my eyes.
amount of lines.
Yeah.
For Stefano, how did you get started making films, and do you have any fun stories from your early films?
I was born. My father was a director, so I literally grew up on set. So this was what I did from when I was like this, more or less. And then in the beginning was a bit boring because if you go on a set without knowing exactly what's the job about, it's super boring because no one is doing the same. It's not an orchestra where everybody is playing at the same time. You go on set and then people hang around, you don't understand what they are doing, and then suddenly they do something just for a minute, and then they stop again for 2 hours. For me, I remember it was exhausting, just the idea to be on set. But then a day, I put it, because I was with my father in the editing room everywhere. And then a day, and I was watching a Western, suddenly I put together all the pieces. I said, whoa. And then I understand what my father was doing for life. And then I said, this is crazy. I want to do this in my future. Because look at them. They earn money. They play like kids, but in a much more sophisticated way. Because I'm going... instead of a horse, I have a broomstick. They have a real horse. They have a real gun. So I decided I cannot do anything else. This is it's going to be my future. And then I started by doing a short film. In the beginning, I started as a news cameraman. So I did an incredible amount of work related to... Because at the end, I think you need to have a lot of experience to do this job. This is the only true. You have to do it, do it, do it, do it.
Thank you, first off. And so many of us want to be filmmakers in some form or facet. The director-producer relationship is really interesting to us as we're new to so much of it. So really a question for both of you is, honestly, you're allowed to be, in what ways did Edward and the other producers protect you throughout the process?
He protected me a lot. But let's say this. I don't think this is the producer and the director has to work together in order to get something good. Because of course, my job is to push the system, the mechanism over its natural limit. And his job is to help me in doing this. But the job I'm doing it for him. And also, I think it's, I really believe that in order to get a good movie, you, on the back, you need to have a producer and a director that works in a good way together.
Do you want to add anything to that?
Nope.
No?
He's the director. I'll let him.
Yes.
Just a quick question. Why Sicario out of any possible project? Like, what intrigued you about doing a sequel of a movie about Mexican cartels in the U.S. and dragons of it, which, especially these movies, like the first one, Sicario, was quite controversial because of its portrayal of the Mexican cartels and Mexican culture. What intrigued you in like making this puzzle and this specific puzzle?
I did almost all my projects were controversial, so I was not absolutely worried about it. For me, it's pretty normal. This is what I was referring when I said this is a project that is really close to everything I did. I loved the movie Sicario. I thought it was the best movie that year, and then was also a movie close to what I'm doing and was a kind of a genre of movie that we don't produce anymore, and it's a pity. So I wasn't worried at all about the controversial aspect of it, and because of course it's part of my of what I did until now. I mean, so I wasn't worried.
Hi, Stefano. That was definitely not a Disney movie. Now, the question is, when you said you lost 15 minutes on the editing floor, remember? That scene when the convoy got ambushed, the Humvees and the federal police turned against them, the little girl escapes, but then there was a guy with a pickup truck. Later he tried to kidnap the girl. Did you guys lose it on the editing floor? Because it was a little bit confusing, the connection of the pickup truck to the Humvees, like, how could they get out of
Totally
it?
agree. I tell you a story. No. No. Now I explain the backstory, and one is my editor calling me, asking me, what about how I can deal with the Navajo? Navajo. I said, what are you talking about, Matt? And he was referring to the guy, but of course, yeah, of the pickup truck. But because no, that was it. I mean, we didn't cut anything, but we thought that it was super clear, and it's not probably.
It's one of those things when you're in the moment, it just made so much sense to have a guy come and try to save her and have Alejandro realize he wasn't going to save her at all, that he was part of the Matamoros cartel and he was going to use her to bargain her away. So basically by killing him, you know, he was showing her, be careful who you trust, and basically was part of his, you know, her gaining his trust, his gaining her trust. So we thought it was really clear when we shot it until afterwards, and everybody said, who's the Navajo? And it's interesting because he's half Indian and half Mexican.
Wait, so going back to Squibs and Miners, when he gets blown away, that's right next to her face. So how did you pull that off?
That was done with air.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
No explosion, of course. It was just a little bit of air.
Okay. It's a very good one.
Yes.
I'm just referring to kind of the heels of that last question. With Camorra, which is a TV show I really love, about the Naples Mafia, I believe. There's a character that has to, kind of reminds me of the Soldado in this series, the one in this, not this series, in this movie, the little boy who becomes the one that shoots Benicio. Because isn't Don Pietro's son has to go to Latin America to join a cartel and basically shoot. Was there any carryover between those? Like, did you learn anything from that?
No, I mean, but this is the process. It's what's happened in this kind of criminal world, and in a way, the Mexican cartel are really close to our mafia. So this is the reason why I think that we all.
And I think that's interesting to look at it that way. That even though you're not, this is focused and packaged as being a border between the issue between two neighbors, that actually influences over to Italy as well.
Yeah, but also related to the topic of the migration, we have the same problem. No, I mean it's the same. So we have a different border. It's not a desert; it's a sea, but it's absolutely the same.
It seems like our approaches are starting to mirror each other with the two governments that we have now. Yes.
What are some hardships you experienced in this film? Is there anything you would have done different?
You know what? Every time I watch something I did, I will do it again. So almost every, and I rewatched the convoy sequence and I said, what? Why I left this? Why I didn't cut it that way? I mean, this is the reason why I cannot rewatch it. Because no, really, sometimes I feel like dumb. It's like you are speaking about a movie that you didn't like. Not even you did. You say, why? So I have this strange, and every time I watch the movie, I will recut it again, a little bit.
All right, let's take two more. Hold on.
Sorry, go ahead.
First of all, loved the movie. Actually, I liked it even more than the first one. I was wondering just the sense that it felt like there was a real setup between Josh Brolin's character and Benicio del Toro, like going head to head in a way. And we never. Is there a reason? I guess in a way they did, but is there a sense of why you didn't want that to be so? Really on the surface, like them really going head to head like that.
No, this was part of my pitch. It wasn't in the script. The first time I met them for Soldado, I tell them, you have to put them a little bit one against the other because this is something that is gonna show better how they are as character. Because it's like even you break a little bit the idea that you had on the first one where they are buddy, they're friends. In this one, you discover that they are not buddy. They're just good at what they do. And probably Matt is using a little bit the rage, the desire of vengeance of Alejandro. So I felt it was more interesting. For the two characters.
There's a point they basically never see each other again after a certain point, right?
Yes.
So it's like they're going up against each other, but they never actually went up against each other in a sense. Even though we have the feeling that they're up, we have the sense that they're up against each other the whole time.
Yeah, but you use it a little bit with Isabel.
Yes.
Because when Matt lands, you're almost sure that probably it's gonna kill her.
Mm. Because we also see a big change in Brolin's character too, right? In that sense, right? He would do almost anything, but he has a line even for himself.
I think that this makes the movie interesting, you know? When everything changes so fast that you just have to watch it.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
Thank you.
There's a whole bunch of questions now. USC hat.
What do both of you, this is a question for both of you, what do you wish you had known when you were students that you know now? You were in our shoes. What do you wish you had known?
A lot. Yeah, because basically, I think that this is a job where if you have experience, probably you can fight and win to protect your ideas. And then, of course, the only way you have to get experience is to do it. But it's really difficult. So, this is the reason why I said, whoa, because it's a bit complicated. My personal approach was to try to shoot even short film. I did an incredible amount of short film. I did TV, crappy TV. Everything is gonna be part of your experience, and when you need it, you're going to be enough sure of yourself to fight for your ideas.
It becomes instinct. If I could say I wish I had a greater instinct when I started out, but by experience, you develop a set of instincts. I'll be on a set today after 30 years of doing it, and I'll just know the camera's either too close, or we have a problem here, or the story's not working. And so if I could say I had that instinct back 25 years ago when I started, it would have been really nice.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, Eric, give us the... bring us home.
Real quick, as an ex-journalist, and you both are very conscious, aware, and moral people with the characters, the fact that you're editing this film and immigration is in the news every single day. I guess my question is, can commercial between commercial cinema and contemporary politics. I don't know, I've confused sometimes how to blend them, and maybe the story wouldn't be as rich if it wasn't as dramatized, but did you feel as filmmakers at times, I don't know, inclined to make this more of a political statement as opposed to the story of these particular characters? I guess I don't know how to ask the question, but it's just so contemporary, the topic.
No, if you let that enter into good storytelling, I think, at least for me, that's a mistake. Taylor had created 2 and 3 characters that we love to go on the ride with, so we wanted to tell a story about these characters that were working in a world. Were we impacted by what we see every day and what we hear in the news? Yeah, but I'd say it's probably subtextual. It wasn't like, oh, well, this is happening. How do we incorporate that into our story? It wasn't. This film is not that kind of a story. Some people make great movies like that. That was not our intent. Our intent was to tell a continuation of the story of these 2 guys and where do they go from where we left them.
I did a lot of controversial movie, but I think that first you have to make an entertaining movie. Then, if you are good enough, you can make a smart movie, and that's it.
And also the lead time. I mean, it's years, and you can't. Could we have predicted where we are today with immigration 4 or 5 years ago when we first started developing this story?
Well, I saw a brief headline earlier today that said critics are demanding Sicario 3. So I can't wait to see this again, and I hope you guys will all tell everyone about it. It's coming out June 29th.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited that you guys were willing to come and spend the evening with us and share your stories about making this movie. Thank you both so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.